Tony is the founder and CEO of Booktopia. I think most of us think of him as one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs. It's an amazing story to take a business from almost nothing to the size it is today, $200 million. And I think, given that we've had many startups go through these sessions over the years, Tony's is definitely here to stay. I don't know. We were discussing earlier, when do you stop being a startup? And maybe Tony, you could reflect on that as you go. But it's my great pleasure to introduce Tony, and I'll just hand to Tony Nash. Welcome, Tony.
Thanks, David, and great to be on the program. I do have slides that I've presented, and I will normally present to a session like this, but I can just feel that that's going to be really clunky. So if I need to cross over to one, I will. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to talk to you if that's okay. Great to be here, and congrats. It was a real pleasure to be there last night with everyone. It was just a great conversation. I actually learned a lot, so it was really helpful for me and my business. Before I dive into perhaps some of the details, I should, in terms of I guess earning the right to speak to you, is go through some of my credentials. I think they're pretty important. I got 56% of my HSC. I went to university where I mastered in Space Invaders and snooker and failed in accounting and economics, and dropped out and became the mail boy at the NRMA. If you ever saw those movies in the 80s where a guy was going around with a trolley handing out the envelopes to people, yeah, that was me. You know, they crossed out the name and then gave it to the next person. I was the email system of NRMA in the 1980s. I have been bankrupt. Apparently I cannot sing one note in tune in a whole song, according to my wife. And I found out about 4 years ago that I have ADHD, and I've lived with it all my life. And not that I knew that, but when my son was diagnosed, my wife said, "I think you've got it as well," and off I went. So that's my background. In the very esteemed. There's no Harvard business degree in there. There's no business skills or background. I simply came from probably similar backgrounds to many people. But Booktopia, as David was saying, has gone on to be quite a success. I started it in 2004 as a little side project on a budget of $10 per day. At the time, we were doing internet marketing, getting people to the top of Google, driving traffic into websites. And when I say we, I've been in business with my brother and my sister and my brother-in-law for 22 years. My brother retired actually at the end of last year. And so not only has it been a growing business, but it's been a family one as well, which has had its own complexities and interests. And from those humble beginnings, I grew the business by selling my first book after 3 days. That was the total sales for the whole day, one book. By the end of the month, I had done $2,000. By the fourth month, I was up to $30,000 a month. And by the end of the year, $100,000 a month. Because it was a side project, there was no planning or vision or light bulb moment. We actually had done a job to get Angus and Robertson to the top of Google through our internet marketing business. And it was through that we were introduced to a company in Sydney that managed their site, fulfilled their orders, and I actually used their platform to start Booktopia. So it was after a couple of years we were turning over 2 million that I realized that we were onto something, and we parted ways with that company. We basically took a little warehouse in Artarmon in Sydney. It's an inner suburb near the city, near North Sydney, and basically rang the publishers and said, "It's us, it's Booktopia. We're turning over 2 million a year. Never heard of you," because all our orders had been going through this other company. So we basically had to start from scratch almost and build from there. By 2010, we were in 2,000 square meters. We had about $10 million in revenue. And from there, we went on to this year. So we're a month and a half away, I guess, from doing around $217 million in revenue with about $12.9 million of EBITDA. We never raised any capital. So we basically bootstrapped and built the business from selling more books to use that money to hire more people, write more software, hold more stock, build the automation. We now have around $26 million of automation here, about $10 million of stock. And it was only beginning of last year where we did our first capital raise of $8 million, and we already had revenue of 150 million. And so at the end of last year, because of the pandemic and the spotlight on e-commerce, we were fortunate enough to fast track an IPO and listed on the ASX in December of last year. Today with a market cap of around 350 million. I must admit I haven't looked recently, so it's around that amount. So what's astonishing about that, if you think about it, is that we're Aussie. We had no experience in books. In fact, I wasn't even a reader, and so we kind of focused on things that others weren't focusing on, and that is what I want to share with you a bit about today in terms of how the hell do they do that? I mean, the last 17 years that we've been going, people have been talking about the end of the physical book, that bookshops were going to close down and Amazon was going to annihilate us. So it's quite a miraculous and amazing story. And I do want to share some of the insights on how we actually became successful. But more importantly for me, the part of a session like this, which I love the most, is the questions. So I am going to try and leave as much time as we can for questions, and let's power in. So for me, the idea of being an entrepreneur is that we make the invisible visible. Nothing ever existed, and then it exists. Now, just because I'm a business owner and people call me an entrepreneur, to me, everyone is an entrepreneur. Within your companies, people are building systems that never existed before. They think of something, a better way of addressing a customer need, or there's wastage in terms of time or money, and you guys go out there and build something. And that, to me, is entrepreneurship. And the word entrepreneur comes from the French, to enter and take. So it's kind of like hacking the universe. The universe had it out there, but we go out there and hack it and then bring it in and make it and manifest it. So I see that as something that is available to all of us, not just me. That's my thinking, and that's what I encourage, especially when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, for them to realize that that's totally available to us at all times. So today I'm going to talk about some of my golden ingots, not nuggets. Some people talk about nuggets. Nuggets is like walking down, the countryside in Victoria, and someone comes across a gold nugget. I mean, it happened a year or so ago in Victoria. Some guy walked around and he kept it back in his house for 3 days before he told anyone, and it was valued at $17,000. I mean, that's finding a lump of gold. To me, what I've done here is I've distilled the gold down for you today in the best way I can, so you can take it away with you. So my first ingot, probably one that's really basic, asking. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. And that's what we've gone out and done. I'm constantly curious. I'm constantly asking questions about certain things. For those that were sitting around me, the table last night, there was lots of questions, good questions, great answers, and you get great, incredible insights. And that's what it's all about. So, for example, I mean, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, an engineer, they all know how to ask great questions relating to their industry. Last year, during COVID, my neighbor, he was doing some hacking with his pickaxe to try and get rid of some bamboo that was in his front yard. And his front yard, there was a 2-meter kind of ledge underneath him. And when he went to hit it, he missed, and he went flying down to the 2-meter ledge underneath him, rolled over that 2-meter ledge to another 2 meters down onto the driveway, and cracked his head open. And as I was reversing out of the car, there was a lady standing over him, and I get out of the car and I see Bruce on the ground, and I go look at her, and I don't know about you guys, but I've done first aid training at Booktopia twice. You do the course, you get the certificate when we were smaller. But in that moment, I didn't remember what to ask. Like, luckily, a doctor had driven past us at that time and got out of the car. He was an ophthalmologist, but he still knew what to ask, and he took care of Bruce in that moment. So for me, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. But more importantly for me is that in the heat of the moment, what's automatic? When COVID hit, what questions were people asking? How grounded were we? How stable were we? And that's super important. What is automatic within your system? So you don't have to sit there and go, now, what did they say in that first aid course? It's fundamental in our business. And for me to share with you, one of the secrets to our success, we've asked one question every single day. What do our customers want? For 17 years, we've asked the same thing. And I can assure you, it's embarrassing in the book industry, which is 570 years old, how little those people, from my experience, were even asking the question. There was just, they just kind of played the game like the world was flat. This is the way it is, and the way it always was. I remember when I first started out, and we were starting to get introduced to publishers, and we were growing, so we'd be coming on the radar. And I was talking to Penguin, and I forget which book it was, but there was the data feeds that you got from the publishers were, it had Cat in the Hat, the. So when you looked at our website, the title, it said Cat in the Hat, the. I said, why the hell are you doing this? It looks stupid on the internet. They goes, oh, well, that's the way the librarians want it. Who cares what the librarians want? It looks silly on the internet. Guys, can't you see how ridiculous that is? You can't understand how long it took for us to, I don't have this little hair because I haven't been pulling my hair out for 17 years, I can assure you. It's like, it was really, really frustrating, but very, very valuable for me, because I could see that the way that I saw the world was very different to the way that they saw the world. And because we were focusing on the customer and identifying what they wanted, that really did propel us. And at $220 odd million in revenue, the number 2 online retailer in Australia, excluding Amazon, is 20 million in revenue. And I can assure you, it is that reason, mostly alone, by seeking out what the answer is to what our customers wanted, ended us up here rather than with everyone else back there. I'm going to share you another little story, which is perhaps not related to what you guys are doing, but I do want to share it because it's one of the reasons why Booktopia has been successful. When you think about Booktopia, I want you to know this one. So before I started my first company, I did a course with Robert Kiyosaki, the guy that wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was about 5 years before he wrote that book, so that was not even on the horizon for him yet. And it was a business school for entrepreneurs in Hawaii, 16 days. And during one of the courses, a bit, I guess, like a course like this, but it was for 16 days, he asked us in a break, could you just go out and in the breakout area, pull a dollar bill, we're in America, in Hawaii, pull a dollar bill out of your pocket, and I want you to go out there and sell. Whatever it is, sell yourself. And if you're the person being sold to, out of integrity, if you feel like you want that, hand over the dollar. Okay, so off I go. Now, at that time, I was in recruitment for the IT industry. And so I went out there and I went hard and I went strong. It was like, we've got the best people, we spend more money on advertising. And I was just really over the top enthusiastic. And I didn't make $1. And I walked back into the room after the break and this process really sucks. Like, I'm the best salesman in the company. Actually, I was at the time the best salesman in the company. It's like, like that's not real. So the course goes on. At the next break, he asked us to do it again. And we go out. This time I was more loving, like we really take care of our candidates. We listen to our clients. We want to hear what they have to say. And everyone was so nice in their feedback. Oh, Tony, that's so lovely, but no, I don't think so. So I walked back into the room after the break, that process really sucks. I'm the best salesman in my company, like you can go and get stuffed. And so the course goes on. We get to the next break. And then I did something completely different. I actually sat in the corner with my arms folded and my legs crossed and told them you can go and get stuffed. But that didn't work either. So the course goes on. While I'm sitting there, funnily enough, in the next break, before the next break, I remembered, I'd done a massage course. I'm actually qualified as a remedial masseur. So in the next break, I went out and I sold a 3-minute massage for $1 and I made $14. It was so I know it's small, but it was such a monumental thing for me to understand how important it was to pivot and follow the cash. Why are people going to hand over money? What are they looking for? And I can assure you, even though I was an employee at the time, that experience was so important for me to understand that. And when I talk to budding entrepreneurs and they've got an idea, I'm going to say, I ask them, so where are people going to hand over the money? Is it really, can you see that point of transaction? And quite often, I'm amazed. Before I logged on, before we started this session, and when I had logged on before, there was a bit of chatter going on about Afterpay. And Nick Molnar and my deputy CEO, Wayne Baskin, are best mates. And so when Nick had his $3 million online jewelry store, he would come in and see us. Nick, how's it going, mate? What are you doing? He goes, oh, I've got this idea that at the end of a checkout, if you can get customers to pay over 4 easy payments over 2 months, then that's another way of paying. And I thought, that's like lay-by. And I go, that's a brilliant idea, mate. But did he ask me to invest in it? No, he didn't. It's really annoying that he didn't. I would have made a lot of money. But nonetheless, it didn't happen. But, you got to understand that's really important. And that to Booktopia's success as well is also one of those golden ingots, to focus on the cash. The next one probably is, I don't know, a little bit more relevant to this group from what I understand in terms of the forum. But it's an important one for me, and it's an important one for why we've been successful.
Tony,
Go on.
I get the ingot, but in Booktopia's terms, could you give us a story about where that cash focus, maybe what it made you do or do different or pivot or something? So yep. It's a very important principle, but if you could bring it to life in your business, that would be great.
Sure. So before Booktopia, and I'll do two. Okay. So one before Booktopia, when we and my family business. So we sold our recruitment company in 2001 because we had built this chat software for companies to be able to chat with their clients and customers on the websites, and we were going to make a fortune with this chat software. But then the dot-com crash happened, and I said to we were making no money. We actually couldn't pay ourselves a salary, and I said to a web designer, Google's been going for a few years. How do you get to the top of Google? And he told me what to do to get to the top of Google, and I did what we had to do. We got to the top of Google for live chat and chat software, live help. And so I was talking to this lady about getting her to use chat software, and she said, look, I'd love to chat to people. I just need more people coming to my website. And I said to her, well, I can get you to the top of Google. Well, give me a proposal. So I did for $500, and I got it to the top of Google. And she was very happy. But because we were in such dire straits, we weren't sure what we were going to do. And I was talking to the largest car rental company in New Zealand. And I said to them, about the chat software, similar conversation. Love to chat to people, need more people coming to my website. Well, I can get you to the top of Google. Gave them a proposal. Instead of putting one in for $500, I put one for $18,000. And I spoke to the guy for an hour on the phone about all the things we're going to do with his website and driving traffic and improving the business. And at the end of the hour, he said, all right, let's do it. And I put down the phone. I looked at my family and I said, shit, we're in big trouble now. We have no idea what we're doing. But it was that experience back in Hawaii, almost 10 years before, that made me realize how we could pivot and then really go for it and let the other go that wasn't working. And then we just added the chat software in part of our service. So that's definitely one. When it comes to Booktopia, there was a situation that occurred where one of the publishers that I had met in London at the London Book Fair had lost their distributor in Australia, and they rang me because I'd seen them 6 months before. And they were desperate because 5 of their medical textbooks had been adopted for next semester in a few months' time, medical courses. And, can you have them? Could you please have them on your site so students can order them? Sure, no problem. Who's going to be a distributor? And they said, well, we don't know. And I said, well, could we? And she said, well, I guess. I said, what are the terms? And she said, look, this is the discount. And it was about 20 points more discount being the distributor than a retailer. What about the stock? Oh, the same. You just get it on consignment. Well, we were buying the stock, so here, have it for free. And what about payment terms? well, you got 90 days to pay for it. We were on 30 days. So I got off that phone call. I walked down to the other end of the building and I looked at my CFO and I told him about this deal about becoming a distributor instead of being just a retailer. It's very rare that you get a smile on a CFO's face from one earlobe to the other. But on that day I did, and I knew I was onto something. So that's how come we've now got heavily into book distribution. So yes, there's a couple of examples of being able to pivot and follow the cash. Good question. So this next one, this next ingot is to do with, I did a workshop, I'm just chunking it down, but we use it all the time in business. It's like this workshop, it was about 30 of us in the workshop, and we were split into two groups. And my group was the cats and the other group was the dogs. And they put two kind of masking tape lines down one side of the room, and we were broken up, and the team leaders, the facilitators said to our group, they said, look, guys, you're the cats. You got to get from our side of the room to the other side of the room without being caught by the dogs. Fair enough. All right, in we go. Ready, set, go. So a lot of us got across, but there was people kind of giggling, and there was, maybe 3/4 got across and others got caught. All right, we had a debrief. Okay, what did you do? What did you learn? Well, this and this and this. Okay, please, we're going to do it again. This time, try as hard as you can. So the dogs were told you got to try as hard as you can to stop everyone. So we went through, and there was, I don't know, injuries, but there was a little bit more intensity, and maybe 90% of us got through. In the debrief, talked about it. What did you do? What did you learn, etc. And then the facilitator in our group said, all right, guys, your kittens are on the other side of the room. And if you do not get across, those dogs are going to eat your kittens. Ready, set, go. We pulverized them. And there was some, people who had not done a lot of exercise in quite a while. They smashed through to the other side. Now, that's what a lot of business is about. Sometimes you just have that intensity of focus. It's about understanding what's at play here. We did our IPO in 11 weeks. 11 weeks is one of the fastest IPOs in history. Why? Because it was just like, we've got to get it done because the American election is on this date and we don't know what's going to happen after that. And e-commerce is hot. And so we were making decisions where we perhaps in the past would have pondered over and thought, well, nah, we're not doing that. We're doing this. It's really, really important. And our success through that process was terrific. So I think that's an important intensity of focus. My next ingot is, you've all heard of the expression win-win. It's got to be win-win. You win and I win, right? Or win-lose, right? There is no such thing as win-win. It's double win-win. So for me, what that looks like is that Booktopia needs to win, the customer needs to win, our suppliers need to win, and the people who work for us also need to win. They need to be on a good salary and have good working conditions. Double win-win. If you do not have double win-win and there's losers, it's an unsustainable model. So Amazon, for example, like Amazon wins, the customer wins, everything's customer focused. They do really well there. But I know, because I talk to the suppliers, they're screwed to all hell. It's really tough. There's penalties and lots of things if they don't do things a certain way. And the employees, like you hear some stories, I don't know whether they're true or urban myths, but ambulances waiting outside the warehouses at Christmas time for employees who have passed out. It's probably not true, but I like to talk it up, in case it is actually, true. It's not anything helps. So double win-win. It's really, if you don't have those four, it ain't happening. It's super important. And I can tell you, there's been some times with a supplier, I've said to them, please don't do this deal if you're just trying to win our business. I need to know you're making money, which is really absurd. This one, based on the conversations last night, I think is probably quite relevant. And so I really want to touch on this ingot. We had an HR manager who came to me a few years, 3 or 4 years ago, I forget how long. And she said to me, your business is stuffed. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, everyone hates each other. So like who? She goes, well, IT, they hate marketing hate IT. I said, really? She goes, oh yeah, it's a disaster. you've got a lot of problems. Okay, thanks for the feedback. Thanks for letting me know. So I go off to the head of IT, and I said, I heard you really hate marketing. Why do you say that? Well, HR, our HR manager, she said that, you really hate those guys, annoy the crap out of you. And so, oh no, those guys are geniuses. What do you mean? The stuff they come up with ideas to promote and market books, it's incredible, incredible. I said, well, what's the problem then? Oh, they're hopeless at keeping time agreements, and they always come in at the last minute, and we all have to jump and like really respond. And, it annoys the crap out of us. We can't plan anything. Okay, fair enough. But they're okay. They're good. Oh yeah, they're geniuses. Fair enough. So then I go across to the head of marketing. I said, so you really must hate IT. Why do you say that? Those guys are gurus. They're brilliant. And well, why is HR telling me that you hate them? Oh yeah, they're just so demanding. You got to do this and you got to do that. It just drives us crazy. All right, but they're good, right? They're good. Absolutely. Fair enough. So I didn't do anything. I let it go. Anyway, a few months later, our HR manager, Helen, that's her real name. I'm not kind of adding a name in there just to, protect her. Helen was leaving. She was going into she was actually going to another company, a really great job. And I said, look, do you mind? I wouldn't normally do this, but I'd love to have an exit interview with you. She said, sure, come on, let's sit down. So we did. And I asked her, I said, do you really still think that our business is going down the toilet? Oh, you've got so many problems in this company, really. And I said, okay. Now, I knew where I was leading her with this. And she said, I said, just humor me out for a sec, if you could. Does it kind of feel like to you, like if we were in a rowing boat together, that we're all, like we're all not rowing, it's all disjointed? She goes, absolutely. That's a great metaphor. We're all disjointed. I said, well, I don't subscribe to that thinking. She goes, what do you mean? I said, well, imagine being on a sailing boat with a spinnaker up and a wind behind you. You imagine the 3 points of the spinnaker and they're all pulling in different directions. I said, I've worked with my brother and my brother-in-law for 20 years. And my brother hates spending money. It really annoys the crap out of me. Thankfully, he's retired now, but he's very, very risk averse, right? So when I'm trying to grow and drive the business, I've always got him in mind. I know that I've got to be profitable and I've got to be sustainable. It's actually been quite helpful for me to have someone pulling in the complete opposite direction to me for marketing. And my brother-in-law, Steve, he's really into compliance. Everything needs to be spot on. We got to, we overspend on making sure that all of the things are in place to take care of the business and our people, and right, which is absolutely important. So we're all pulling in different directions. I explained this to her. I said, the way it feels like to me is that marketing and IT are in a very similar state. They're all dedicated to the same outcome. We're all heading in the same direction, but it just feels like we're pulling in different directions. So that positive conflict, which is the ingot that I'm talking about, is really, really important. And sometimes, whether it's HR or whatever's going on, I don't listen as much to the noise. I just want to tap in and see if they're all like siblings like we are siblings, my brother and I, and are we all kind of on the same mission, but it just feels like there's some positive tension going on. It's been really, really important, because otherwise I could have been, tending to that noise, which wasn't relevant, which wasn't correct. So that's another one, that positive conflict. This one here.
I'm sorry, Tony, I need to stop you on that one. How would you spot negative conflict? Because obviously to some people they look the same, or it sounds like they do.
So it's all about going back to the questions. So what is your purpose? Like I went in and asked questions of those two leaders, and I said, so what's it going on for you? How does it feel like? You got to drill down. Each one is different. I mean, we've had team members who needed to be whittled out of the company. There's a great little book, which quite frankly, all you need to do is read the cover. I mean, it's a classic kind of business parable from the 70s or 80s, I think, called Zap versus Sap, something like that. So people either zap you or sap you. And, once you kind of think of that, you go, I understand what the book's about. And so there's if people are really sucking the energy out of you and out of the system, then that's probably that's an issue that needs to be addressed. But then you got to go searching to see if it's actually you're all on the same boat. You're just doing some really I love Brené Brown. If anyone likes reading Brené Brown, she's my favorite. I'm listening to her audiobook again on my drive backwards and forwards on the Booktopia audio app. A little plug. And so, she talks about that robust conversation and having the permission to really speak up and be daring in your leadership. And I think that's the way that I look at that. That's probably not a great example, but it's more the, what I'm looking for. So the next one I wanted to share with you, which is super, super important to me. It may not be as relevant to you guys. I do hope you can use it in your life, but this is really important. This one's really important. So imagine that you're in a Maserati. I don't own a Maserati, but imagine that you did. And as Maseratis are prone to do, they're Italian sports cars. They quite often end up in the workshop. And on this particular day, your Maserati is in the workshop, and the mechanic gives you the loaner, which is a 15-year-old Fiat 2-door. And you got a super important meeting down in Double Bay, or perhaps in Toorak if you're in Melbourne. Can't think of a street in Brisbane, but you'll know which one it is. And you think, oh God, I'm in this loaner, this Fiat. I've got a 9 o'clock appointment. I better get down there. I'll just park in one of the back streets and walk around and meet this very important client who I've never done business with, but I'm going to pitch this big deal, and so I'll be fine. Unfortunately, there's no other spots. Everything is taken except the one spot in front of the cafe restaurant where you've got to do this meeting. And you think, well, it's almost 9 o'clock, 30 seconds to 9. I better get out. On time is on time and late is late. And so you just park in front of the restaurant. And as you're getting out of this car, you see the people, they're looking at you, you're looking at them, and then they see this old Fiat, and you're going to yourself, but this is not my car. This is not, I own a Maserati. I own a Maserati. This is not me, right? You are not your car. You are not your business. You are not your kids' sporting results or academic results. You are not your wife or your husband. You are not your sports team. Even though a good mate of mine thinks he's the Richmond Tigers, right? And when they won the pennant, he was, like very, he owned it all, but he is not. I am not Booktopia. And I have had clear separation from the beginning. That is an organism of its own accord. And I remember in the apartment block that I was living in at the time, just as I had started, I was walking down the corridor and I stopped in front of the room where I had my desk in my office, because I heard this boom, 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 boom. I could actually hear the heartbeat of my little business that had just started. I remember when it just crawled. I remember when it took its first steps and it walked, and when it went to daycare for a day, 2 days, 5 days, when it went to preschool and primary school and high school, and when it got to university, all that time, that ability to be able to separate myself, thinking about what does that business need? Because I am not Booktopia. And it's been really helpful, because if my ego was attached to it, if my identity was attached to it, I'm sure Booktopia would never be as big as it is today, because my values or my limitations or my beliefs about who I think I am, right, may have stopped it. And when I could hear some chatter in the beginning about businesses that have maybe come through this program in the past that no longer exist. There's an element of that, because I remember when I joined the CEO Institute in 2010. I was in it for a year, and we had made the BRW Fast 100 that year for the first time. We actually made it 8 times, the only company ever to make it 8 times. And the lady who ran that group, she said, "Oh, BRW Fast 100. Well, that's a bad omen, because the last company that was in here that made that, they're no longer in business." But this whole idea of separating and making sure that that you don't put any of your own personal glass ceilings over the business. For me, if you want to understand how did you keep growing and growing and growing, is because I'm not the company. So you are not your car. That's one of the most important, for me, one of the most important ingots I actually have. In terms of time, I'm just keeping an eye on time. Dave, are you happy for me to keep going? Well, yeah, excellent.
No, more time. I mean, people will start to hit with questions. If people can be starting to line up their questions, that's great. And by all means, start firing them through, and we'll see how we go.
I've got about
We've got time.
five more
Yeah.
ingots.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
then the next one, I'll give you two. I'm going to give you two examples of this. The first is really funny, and I shared it last night, I think, with Karen from Nestle, if I recall. So what happened was I've started doing a bit of public speaking over the last few years. Now, the company that represents me, they wanted me to do a training, do it with these coaches. You got to get these coaches to get your script right. So I, paid them and we worked together and I came up with this script, and it was like in big font because I need to wear glasses. So it was 30 pages in 16 font, right? And I go to this event and I'm speaking to them. I just had to read it word for word from the paper. It was so embarrassing. I just because I got to speak like this. I can't go off a script. Don't ask me to go off a script. I just want to talk, right? No, because you got to get all the jokes right and the timing needs to be right. Okay, all right, I'll do, right? Because that's what obviously other professional, speakers do. And so it was embarrassing. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. Anyway, I let it go. And probably about a year or so later, we had business had grown further. We won the Telstra Business Awards of the year, I think, something like that. And I was getting more requests. And so I had another request. All right. So I prepared, I said, I'll do it. And they wanted a slides. And because it was a presentation, you got to have slides. I don't do slides. Don't ask me to do slides. I hate slides. No, you got to have slides. All the professionals have slides. All right. So I created the slide deck where there was just one word of these ingots, like I've been talking about. And so I gave it to him. He goes, that's terrible. You can't have that. So my EA Zia, she prettied it up with, books on the page and all these things. And so it was about 9 o'clock that night, the night before. And I said to my wife, I better just go through this slide deck and work out what I'm going to say tomorrow. And so I kind of went through the deck and I finished at midnight and I got picked up by the driver at 8 a.m. to go to the airport. And so who is this company anyway that I'm presenting to? And I looked through the sheet and it said, about the company, blah, blah, blah. And audience size, 3,000 people. I hadn't even practiced the bloody speech. Like I'm in this, a hire car being picked up from my home to go to the airport to be flown to Melbourne to do the speech. And there's 3,000 people in the audience. And I remember looking out over Sydney Harbour going, bring it on. Now, when I got to Melbourne, I never told them that I never practiced the speech, right? So there's 3,000 people in the audience. It's a massive auditorium, like one of those big convention center halls with seats everywhere. And the guy who was an American big compere, Gary Vaynerchuk, was the big keynote for those of you who follow that kind of thing. He was the last speaker of the day. So it was one of those kind of days. And the guy who was presenting goes, all right, everyone, let's give a big standing O to Tony Nash. And everyone gets up on their feet and they're cheering. And right. And they've got a screen in front of the big stage where it's counting down from 45 minutes to 0. But I was very centered. I was very relaxed. And I just, said whatever I needed to say. And there's something about that, about in business, about just say, bring it on. You got to bring it on, because if you're going to do these things, something's going to be thrown out of you at left field. You just can't freak out. Like one of my friends, she runs a online retail business. She's Italian. My wife's Greek, right? So I know how this can go. She's Italian and I love her dearly. But if she wins an award, she's up high, she's partying, right? If she has a crap month, she is down there kicking chairs. Like if she loses the award, don't even go there, right? She's going up and down, up and down. It drives me crazy. For me, if we win the Telstra Business Awards or we IPO, that's my my celebration. And when we go down, just look at the difference in a distance that she's traveling over time versus me. And that's one of the things personally that I do is just bring it on. If you're going to be in business and you're going to be running big teams, whatever it is, you've got to say, oh, I wasn't expecting that. The pandemic, who was expecting that? No one was expecting it. Bring it on. And you probably can see the ones that have been really successful. So that's one of them. The next one is a thing which I call just the one thing. Just do the one thing. And where I got this from is about 6 years ago, before Amazon came to Australia. We had bought Angus and Robertson back in 2015. So now I can say we're 135 years old. So we we bought Angus and Robertson, but we also bought a camera business because I wanted to show the market investors that, we can buy within our industry, but we could also buy with outside of our industry and make that a success. So I was doing some research at the time, and I was looking at North America and Europe and going, what is it about some companies that are really flourishing when Amazon is doing so well? And everywhere I looked, it's because they focused on one thing and just did that really well. And so that's when I decided to get rid of the camera business, and we moved into distribution, and now we're actually a publisher. So we publish books, we work with authors, and that has been very, very important. It's also very helpful in terms of oscillating around decisions. This is what we do. And when things get thrown at us, and as we've listed, more and more people are coming to us saying, can you buy us? Or, can you take a look at our business? It's like, no, this is what we do. Very, very important for us. The next one for me is just do it. I know that's Nike, but if you want to humor yourself, there's a website called the Wayback Machine, or archive.org. And when you go to that website, you can put in a URL of any website, because that system took like an HTML photograph of websites over time. And you can actually go back to 2004 to Booktopia on the third day of Booktopia, the 7th of February, 3 days after we started. And you can look at what Booktopia looked like when we started. And if you look at that, you go, why would you even want to start the business? It looks terrible. But my thing has been all the way through. It doesn't need to be perfect. Get it up there, get it happening, get the money coming through, focus on the cash. So sometimes I've seen other entrepreneurs and business leaders spend way too much time to achieve perfection rather than executing and being up and running. So it's another one of the keys to our success. Adding value, I think people talk about that a lot. For me, I get asked a lot, will shops survive? A bookshop's going to survive. I say, absolutely. I mean, if you go into a bookshop and there's someone there who's a knowledge expert, I can't on Booktopia emulate that. It's like someone walks in, oh, excuse me, sir, how can I help you? What book do you like? Or I love Girl with a Dragon's Tattoo. Oh, you into Scandinavian crime, are you? What? There's a genre of it's a sub-genre called Scandinavian crime. Let me take you over and introduce you to Joe Nesbo or Camilla Lackberg, right? Someone who's really knows their stuff. It's so easy to add value. So it's always about adding value. So I do think bookshops are going to survive. I don't see them going away. The only problem that exists, and it's embarrassing to say this, especially for you guys who are very customer centric, is you walk into bookshops these days, and I've been into many, because when I see one, I'll go in. The millennials or whoever's working there behind the counter are too afraid to come up and ask me the question, oh, sir, can I help you? Or what are you looking for? I was in Canberra a few years ago when my son was in the soccer tournament down there, and the cafe where we had the lunch, there was a bookshop opposite. I went in and had a look. There was about 4 or 5 families walking around, one lady with a pram and 2 kids, underarm. And the girls that were behind the counter, she found some books and she walked up to the counter, and the young lady behind the counter said to her, oh, great, you found what you were looking for, did you? I cringed. That's embarrassing. Like, that's not adding value. It's awful. When my wife and my wife's best friend, he and his wife have a place in Phuket. And if you've ever been to Thailand or Bali or one of those, there's all those markets where people are selling T-shirts and handbags, and the private room for the handbags, the special handbags, all that stuff is being sold. And the last time we were there 3 or 4 years ago, we were walking through, and I said, honey, did you notice that? And she goes, what do you mean? She goes, come on, let's keep walking. And for this year, for some reason, every single person on that was working on those little stands was on their phone, like looking at their phone. They weren't engaging with us. They weren't saying, t-shirts, come over here, right? Your business is done when that happens. So how are you adding value? And from Booktopia's perspective, everything we've done, holding stock, getting signed copies, having customer service like Alex is on today, right? Having people here from the very first day. You will see on that website on archive.org, our phone number was up the top for our SEO internet marketing business. Call me, right? We had calls in the very beginning. Oh, I just wanted to know you were real. Oh, okay, thanks. Put the phone down. So they placed the order. It's about adding value. We're getting to the end, and we're getting to questions. Last one. So this one is super important to me, and one of the reasons why Booktopia fundamentally has been as successful as it has, and also brought on other opportunities. When I was at that business school in Hawaii with Robert Kiyosaki with that $1 exercise, another thing happened on one of the nights. Was exhausted, and I went to sleep, and I went into a very deep sleep, and I had woken up, and it was about 10:30, 11 p.m. when I came outside to the pool deck, and there was about 5 or 6 people lying on deck chairs in the middle of the night looking up at the sky. What are you guys doing? It's the middle of the night. Oh, there's going to be a lunar eclipse. Oh, really? Okay, so I stood around, and within 15 minutes, there was a lunar eclipse. And it was one of those lunar eclipses where the sun, so the Earth was in the middle. And when the Earth is in the middle of the sun and then the moon is behind, it casts a real soft orangey shadow over the moon. And during that day, we had been doing a workshop with a guy called Keith Cunningham, and he was a negotiation expert and from Texas. And he was saying to us, the group, 150 people, now, if you're going to negotiate, I'm going to try and do a Texan accent here. Texan accent. If you're going to negotiate, you got to think in 3D. 3D, he said. Got to look at it from different perspectives. What is the angle up and down and around, all those things that you need to do. So that's super, super important, because when I was looking at the moon, all of a sudden, with this orangey soft shadow, I could see the foreground in front of the moon. There was a ball hanging in space, and the background. For the first time, my eyes, like one of those magic 3D things that you look at, and all of a sudden it comes into focus and you see it in 3D. It was like that. It was another very important lesson around thinking about business, thinking about opportunities. And Booktopia, definitely, it is what it is today because of that kind of thinking. So we run through a bunch of ingots. I've got a slide deck of about 30 ingots, but this is as much time as we have today. Maybe there could be a part 2 at one time. Happy to come back. And I'd love to cross over to Dave, and we can just go through questions. Thanks.
So there's a couple already lined up. Thank you, Tony. So thank you very much, Tony, for those wonderful ingots. I'm sure you've got us all thinking about what that means for us personally and our businesses. But already we've got some sort of questions coming in, mostly in relation to those. So the first one was, if you are not your business, how do you see yourself